courthouse stood tall and silent under the morning sun, its stone walls carrying the weight of countless judgments delivered over decades. Inside Courtroom for B, the air felt heavier than usual, charged with tension and quiet anticipation. Every bench was occupied. Journalists whispered to one another, pens ready, sensing a story that might stretch beyond routine legal drama. At the defense table sat Sergeant Daniel Harper, a U.S. Army soldier whose posture remained straight, despite the invisible burden pressing against his shoulders. His uniform was immaculate, medals aligned with precision, yet his eyes revealed exhaustion born not from this trial alone, but from years of war, loss, and restraint. Daniel had not planned to be here. Only months earlier, he had returned from his second overseas deployment, hoping to rebuild a sense of normalcy. The airport incident that brought him to court had lasted less than 10 minutes, yet it now threatened to redefine his entire life. To the prosecution, he was an aggressive veteran who crossed the line. To Publi, he was just another name on a docket. But to those who had served beside him, he was the man who stayed calm while others panicked, who gave orders without raising his voice, who carried wounded soldiers out of chaos without asking for recognition. The prosecuting attorney, Ms. Evelyn Carter, rose confidently when the judge called the case to order. Her reputation preceded her: sharp, relentless, and unapologetically aggressive. She walked toward the jury with measured steps, scanning their faces before speaking. From her first sentence, it was clear she intended to control the narrative. She framed the case not as a misunderstanding, but as a warning against what she described as unchecked entitlement. Her gaze briefly flicked toward Daniel, and a faint smirk crossed her face as she spoke about how uniforms and medals often cloud accountability. As her argument unfolded, the tone sharpened. She questioned whether soldiers truly left the battlefield behind when they returned home. She suggested that aggression, authority issues, and emotional instability were common consequences of combat service, subtly planting doubt in the minds of the jurors. A few spectators exchanged uneasy glances, others nodded unconsciously, influenced by her confident delivery. Daniel stood silently, absorbing every word, his jaw clenched but his demeanor controlled. He had heard worse in foreign lands, but never in a place meant to protect justice. Ms. Carter's remarks grew bolder. She openly mocked the idea that military service should grant respect in a civilian courtroom, implying that the defendant expected special treatment. Her words drew a brief, uncomfortable chuckle from the gallery. Daniel felt the sting, not because of pride, but because of the years he had spent proving restraint under circumstances far more dangerous than this room. He thought of the night patrols, the civilians caught between crossfire, the moments where one wrong reaction could end innocent lives. Yet here, those lessons were being twisted into accusations. The judge allowed her to continue, though his expression tightened slightly. When Ms. Carter concluded her opening statement, she sat down with visible satisfaction, convinced she had established dominance. The courtroom buzzed softly until the judge called for order and turned to the defense. Daniel's attorney stood calmly, his tone measured, requesting permission for his client to speak briefly. After a pause, the judge nodded. Daniel rose slowly, his movements deliberate. When he spoke, his voice was steady, neither defensive nor emotional. He addressed the court with respect, making it clear that he was not asking for sympathy, privilege, or admiration. He simply asked that the facts be considered without prejudice. He reminded the jury that discipline, not aggression, had kept him and his fellow soldiers alive overseas, and that the same discipline guided his actions at the airport. His words were brief, but they carried weight. For the first time, the courtroom felt truly quiet. The defense then began presenting evidence, starting with surveillance footage from the airport. The video played on a large screen, capturing the incident from multiple angles. The jury watched as Daniel calmly complied with instructions, his hands visible, his posture relaxed. The footage showed officials escalating the encounter, raising their voices, crowding his space. There was no sign of aggression from Daniel, only restraint. The room grew still as the narrative presented earlier began to unravel. Audio recordings followed, revealing dismissive remarks made about Daniel's service commence. The prosecution had conveniently omitted. Each word echoed through the courtroom, stripping away the assumptions carefully constructed moments earlier. Witnesses were called next. A retired judge who had been traveling that day, a mother with 2 young children, a TSA supervisor. One by one, They testified that Daniel remained calm throughout the incident, contradicting the claim of disorderly conduct. As the evidence mounted, the confidence that once defined Ms. Carter's posture began to fade. Her objections grew frequent but weak, her earlier sarcasm replaced by visible frustration. The turning point came when the defense called Daniel's former commanding officer to the stand. The man spoke plainly, without theatrics, describing Daniel's service with quiet respect. He recounted moments under fire where Daniel had chosen restraint over retaliation, clarity over chaos. He reminded the court that leadership was not about force, but control. When closing arguments concluded, the courtroom felt transformed. What began as a trial, questioning a soldier as character, had evolved into a broader reflection on dignity, bias, and accountability. The judge called for a recess, leaving the room suspended in silence. Daniel sat motionless, hands folded, his mind distant. He was not afraid of the verdict. He was tired of being misunderstood. When the judge returned, every eye fixed forward. The verdict was delivered clearly. Not guilty on all counts. A collective exhale rippled through the room. But the judge continued, addressing the tone and conduct of the prosecution, reminding the court that service to one's country was not a flaw to be mocked or a stereotype to exploit. His words landed heavily, especially on the attorney who had once laughed. Outside the courthouse, sunlight broke through the clouds as reporters surrounded Daniel. Cameras flashed, microphones pressed forward. When asked how it felt to be insulted and then vindicated, Daniel Poussey, his answer was simple. He said this was never about winning or humiliation, but about truth and respect. Within hours, the clip spread across social media, resonating with millions. The story wasn't remembered for the insults spoken in court, but for the quiet strength of a man who refused to let anger speak louder than facts. In the end, Daniel walked away the same way he had walked into the courtroom, silent, disciplined, and unbroken. And for many who watched, his calm became a reminder that true power doesn't shout. It endures.